The adjunct professors at Point Park University, who teach well over half of the classes taught there, made final preparations for the NLRB-sanctioned vote concerning the issue of voting on union formation under the auspices of the United Steelworkers Union of America. Let's listen in on a small portion of today's conversation.
Lost in all of these discussions, and that it really does bother me. The meeting that we had, the last meeting we had with Dr. Kennigan, they start talking about money, and they start talking about how they're going to do these things. And one of the big concerns that I have is they do a terrible job at assessing work performance. They do a very bad job of taking care of, when you were talking about your light switch, I've been teaching in a studio for 3 years that doesn't have a clock. And, really, simple things like that, but I understand it. I understand what's happening because I've been there for so long, and I know that they have so many people that come and go, but that speaks to the fact that they don't pay well. I understand that. But at the end of the day, I want to be the best teacher for my students. That is my reason for being there. I think I'm awesome at what I do.
And I think most of us feel that way.
And that I just feel gets lost because I'm not saying that I feel demeaned that I have to quantify how much money I make or anything like that, but when I see the difference between the administrative salary, the full-time salary, and a part-time salary, that's when I start sitting there like, really? I got all those degrees and I've had all this experience and I'm doing all of this, and you're going to kind of treat it like I'm doing you a favor, like I'm a placeholder. So this goes to the thing about the full-time faculty. That was one of the things that they were wrestling with, was that they had a lot of concerns like that. The full-time faculty were concerned about having dead wood on the faculty that they couldn't get rid of, and for historical reasons or whatever, and then the next thing you know, the administration is sitting there and saying, well, guess what, Yeshiva, all right, you guys are managers, you want to be in control of your program guides, you want to be in control of all these other kinds of things, you're managers. We don't even have that ability to say that, but how do I hold on to that little flame of hope about my teaching?
No, you brought up a subject that I'm sure everyone gets excited about when you think of the possibilities that you have. This is my first time organizing with adjuncts. I am more experienced in organizing in hospitals, but I see, the same type of kind of committees that one sets up in a hospital with nurses, patient care, trying to make sure that people aren't returning too soon, trying to make sure that the services that are provided are, one, good for the patient, and two, good for the nurses providing those services. And I see that apply in the university setting. When you're looking at student outcomes, you have committees for this. You're sitting with the administration and discussing this. Many things can come from that. You guys can have control of, and or at least a say in what student outcomes look like and how you get there. And also, you can look at curriculum, you can look at lots of things.
Yeah, I hear your concerns. I was there for 7 years, and I left to go to IUP, which, even though I was a temporary faculty member there, I was a member of APSCF. And so I went from what Point Park is to a union culture, and now I'm at Duquesne, where I'm a full-time staff member, and I have that material support for teaching. And what I'm hearing you say, and it really speaks to me, because I didn't know, it's the frog that, you raise the temperature of the water 1 degree every hour. When do you know when to scream? And in that sense, I got thrown into, I went from Point Park to a bucket of ice water or something. And it is a question and a matter of dignity. And it's a question of matter of whether or not people believe in education. And I hear you when you say the idea the mission gets lost. And it's a night and day difference. People ask me what my life is like now, and it's like, it's like being behind a velvet rope. Not to but it's a matter of thinking about what's possible, and absolutely that the mission gets lost, and it's a matter of human dignity. It's a matter of all of your dignity.
I was just going to say, this is sort of becoming clear just at this meeting, but just from the house visits we've been doing, this is probably the thing we've heard most from people we're talking about. I would say even more than worries about pay, worries about job security, is frustration with the support for teaching. We hear people saying again and again, they aren't getting the resources they need for teaching. They aren't getting enough time to prepare classes. They're being asked to teach things they don't feel competent to teach, and the administration doesn't seem to care whether they're competent to teach them. Things like that. And so, we could add even from people who aren't as interested in the other issue, from everybody. So I think this is certainly something that any group representing the Point Park adjuncts is going to be very concerned with and taken care of, because that is a really universal concern.
I know early on, back when I was first getting started with all this, one of the very first thoughts I had that inspired me to want to be involved in this sort of thing was, you know what, I teach at 3 different colleges. I teach on average 8 classes a semester. I can give my all to my students when I'm doing that. The simple fact of the matter is that I don't have the economic feasibility of doing less teaching than that and, continuing to not live under a bridge. I like not living under a bridge, but I'd really prefer to focus my efforts on a whole lot less classes than that and give more to my students. And I can't do that if I'm having to stretch myself so thin just to keep a roof over my head.
You had something, Rebecca?
Yeah, this kind of ties in with what somebody was saying. I think I can speak for all of us. Has anyone ever had an evaluation? Has anyone ever been
Peer evaluation?
from the administration? Any kind, anybody come into class in a session teaching?
In 13 years, I've been there I'll be there 14 years now this year. I've had 3 peer evaluations in 14 years.
I've never had one.
I've never had one in again, 16 years. And could be 17 at this point, I'm losing track. But no, the point is if our competency is going to be contingent upon some sort of criteria, which in my mind it currently does not exist, upon what basis is that going to be designed, who's going to design it, and how's it going to be carried out?
Well, they have been making serious efforts in clearing up course objectives and all of those types of things. The last time that we went to the middle states, they really did make a big leap in improving all of that. And I did serve on one of those committees of looking at syllabi for one of the departments, and we got, something that was ridiculous. Some of the syllabi that I looked at, it's like, oh my Lord, it was like written by an 8th grader. Okay, so bad. And then others that were very professional. So I can speak to that Point Park is getting really serious about trying to get that aspect of things taken care of. But again, when you have just a handful of full-time professors and a bunch of part-time people, and the part-time people are co-opted out of those meetings and all of those kinds of things, and they're the preponderance of what the students are getting, how is there supposed to be improvement? There can't be improvement.
And that's the thing that this does. This is not only just about getting us more benefits to pay. This is about giving us a voice in how the university actually runs things, and about us being able to say, we would like to have a say in how curriculum is designed. We would like to have a say in how faculty are evaluated, because we're the people who are on the ground, we know how it works.
Almost all adjunct contracts do specifically lay out a process for evaluation. They say exactly how you're supposed to be evaluated, and usually they say you can't be evaluated exclusively on student surveys, so there has to be some kind of peer evaluation or self-assessment, and those are basically the other 2 media. So they lay out the method of evaluation, and they almost always also lay out a set of criteria. What exactly are you expected to do, and how are the people who are observing you supposed to evaluate you? So that the people who are observing you, because one difficulty with peer evaluation, right, is that if somebody's not trained to do it, they don't necessarily do a good job. They can kind of opine about your teaching, but that's not necessarily very useful. You need to have the people that are going in to do the observation also know what they're looking for. And so the contract is the place where you guys can directly participate in formulating those criteria. What does good teaching involve? What should people be looking for? And that way, when they come into your classroom, you've got a voice in the things that they're, observing.
And it also, there could be a structure for it in the contract. There also might just be language that says we will put together a, evaluation system and criteria for that system, but there will be a committee made up of administration and adjuncts and full-time faculty that discusses this and it's ongoing. So it's probably not something that you have to deal with, like, it might not stay the same for 3 years. It might be something that you meet on a regular basis to discuss, is this working? Can we tweak it? Because, the contract does stay in place for 3 years. So you find oftentimes with like labor management committees and committees that you want to put together, and again, this will be something that you guys decide, what are you going to be focusing on in your committees, what are the outcomes that you'd like to see. You'll just kind of have very generic language is the word I'm looking for, that says these committees will exist. We will put them together. Management has to meet with us every 6 months or something to that effect.
And that raises a good point that like the union is not just about, okay, we negotiate a contract and don't do anything else. This is a situation where it gives us a forum to periodically gather and say, hey, what are our problems? We've identified a problem. Let's form a committee of people to address that problem and then see what we can do about it. So it's a way in which we can have an ongoing set of discussions about ways to make teaching better, about ways to interact better with the university and so forth.
Hennigan did mention the topic of evaluations. Yes. He called a meeting of adjuncts, and I think 5 people showed up. He had this big auditorium with speakers and everything, and he just pulled up a chair with the 5 of us and talked. And the first thing I said was, the poor turnout, it tells you something about the mood of adjuncts. But he talked about evaluation.
Speaking for myself, I was teaching during that meeting.
Oh, you're excused. But writing instructors do get evaluated every semester for several semesters. Then they finally leave you alone. But Hennigan said that he realizes some departments, some professors don't get evaluated at all, and he did want to centralize it. But he said that departments want to do their own thing. They want that, but he wants to bring it in and have evaluations based on tenure, performance, and all sorts of things. So that may be in the works. I don't know.
He wants that decided by committee, but he wants to exclude part-time faculty from that committee. He explicitly said that only full-time faculty will have a voice in that. And that's one of the things that we can address through the union, is we can make sure that part-time faculty, who are, after all, doing the majority of the teaching, should have some say in how their teaching is evaluated.
Were you at the first meeting that Hennigan held? There were like a couple adjunct
In the
meetings.
ballroom.
Yeah, the great big one.
Yes, yes.
And one of the questions that was posed then was, would adjuncts get any say in, these sort of procedures? And Hennigan's explicit reply was, best practices indicate that full-time faculty should be making those decisions. The term best practices was used a lot at that meeting. I became very unfond of the phrase best practices by then. Luke will tell you, he was sitting right next to me.
Is there any discussion in doing your door knocking that we have full-time tenure? Is there any discussion about full-time non-tenure? Seeing as we're talking about best practices in university trends, they're looking at eliminating tenure at so many places. Have people been discussing that for Point Park?
They really haven't. There's been concerns about what's gone on with the full-timers union and, how will this ever improve if they're not recognized, and kind of concerns as to whether or not you guys' unit would be recognized. And obviously that's a non-issue, but we see working with the full-timers as a priority. You guys winning is going to be very important to them because they will then have your support. 75% of the faculty at the university will then be able to say, we want the full-timers at the table with us as well. We can't improve this university, improve student outcomes, retention, graduation rates without them. And so I see this as we've reached out to CWA, we've reached out to some of the leaders of the full-timers union, and we have full intentions on working with them.
Do you have experience on terminology for, in academia, for guest lecturer?
You mean thinking of like visiting assistant professor positions like that?
No, I was employed at CMU, and I was titled a lecturer, and I was in a non-tenured track. And that was the title. There was a few of us that were given that title. We had certain benefits, but it was not, and there's adjuncts and there's lectures at CMU, and there used to be at Point Park a lecturer. So I'm just curious.
Well, one way to do it, so a recent contract negotiated by AUP at Wright State in Ohio, the way they set it up is that basically there's a track for promotion from part-time to full-time. And the full-time positions are explicitly not on the tenure track, but you have academic freedom protection and job security and so on, all the sort of most essential elements of tenure are there. It's not called tenure, but it's sort of reproducing the important elements of that system in a way that is not quite as bound to AUP's 1940 statement of how tenure is supposed to work, which is maybe not as up to date as it should be. So you can do something like that, where you have non-tenure track positions that people can be promoted into. Some people don't want to teach full-time, but those who do, can maybe apply for the promotion of those positions as opposed to doing a general search. And then those positions are more or less the same as a tenure track type position, at the same level of protections, academic freedom and such, but it just might not be called tenure. So that's one way to see it.
CMU, they had the control, when it was stated as such, that they could then close it off and not continue the contract.
Yeah, well, and they don't have a union, and that's one of the reasons why CMU can just write those contracts over if they like.
Did you have something, Clint?
Scratching the ear, but maybe it might be prudent to maybe discuss due structure.
Oh, we did that.
Did we?
Let's talk about what's involved.
We didn't talk about how the dues work, though. That's probably what we wanted.
Unless people don't have questions about it.
Does everyone know what the dues are? No. 1.45%. So that's $1.45 for every $100. This comes out of your gross pay. And again, it will only be the pay that you receive for being an adjunct. So if you work in another position in the university, your dues don't come out of that.
And if you don't teach for a semester, you don't pay any dues next semester.
Right. If we get, parental leave or something like FMLA in the contract, and you're not making any money, yeah, right, you don't pay any dues. And that's about it with the dues.
And they don't apply till you get a contract, right?
Yeah.
You don't pay any dues until you get a contract, and there's no initiation fee when you guys are organizing.
Victor Snyder comments.
And if the contract doesn't bring you a bigger pay boost than 1.45%, you shouldn't ratify it. Ridiculous. So it's not a situation where you're actually going to lose money.
I don't remember who it was on the email exchange who kept saying, well, what if we negotiate a contract that's less than our dues? I'm like, why would you vote in favor of that contract?
Yes, we would all be ashamed of ourselves if that's the way this went.
So I guess I have a question, especially, not everyone teaches every single semester. How long after you've stopped teaching are you still a member of the union? Are you still represented while you're not paying dues? How exactly does that work? So I very often don't get summer classes. I'd like a summer class, but neither here nor there. Would I still be a member of the union during the summer or not?
Absolutely.
Yeah, membership in the union is going to be determined in part by how the bylaws of the local are written, so it's not going to be part of the contract with the employer. That's sort of about your relationship to your own local. And the standard bylaws and steel workers have a bunch of provisions for basically layoff type situations where people are temporarily not employed, but they're going to be employed again as soon as they're recalled. So we can just adapt that language to our circumstances where, over the summer where fewer people teach, we wouldn't want to say that our membership drops to zero and then comes back up, and that makes no sense, right? So people have to remain members for a period. They just wouldn't be paying dues if there's no income, because 1.45% is nothing is nothing. But you still stay a member. There are meetings that you can attend, you can vote, all that stuff. The democratic enfranchisement doesn't change.
Presumably, we would have to put in some kind of stipulation that said, all right, if maybe you haven't taught for X number of consecutive semesters or whatever at that point, you're no longer considered to be an active member,
But you should be able to vote on things that don't actually affect you, that won't affect other people. That's not fair. But the exact time period, that's something you guys can decide. You write your own, you don't have to write them from scratch, but you can modify your own bylaws however you want.
I belong to a union that I pay in every year, and I don't work now every year as a professional actor, but I pay, and if I don't pay, I'm not part of that union anymore. So it depends about the union.
But that's the way we describe here is the way it would work under USW provisions.
Yeah, the actors and stuff, it's sort of a different ballgame because it's different.
A craft team. Any other questions, thoughts?
Anybody want to recite a poem?
Are you volunteering?
No.
Okay.
Close this out?
Well, sure, okay. First off, once again, thank you everybody who came for this today. It is awesome to actually put some names to some faces to names, you know. It's awesome to actually hear all these things and just to know that people are thinking about this and everything. And seriously, thank you everybody for being involved, stepping up, for being part of this. And I hope that everybody came out to continue to be this involved, you know, once we actually have, you know, a ratified union, that I hope that all of you will continue to step up and say, like, hey, I want to be part of the conversation on how this goes down. I want to put in my thoughts about how we put this together, because this is our thing, and the more you become part of it, the more we actually make this work for us. You know? So, thank you.
And unless there's an objection of any sort, I think the next time we meet should be June 25th at 10:30 a.m. Yes? Okay. Where? In the National Labor Relations Board at the Federal Building.
So you'll be counting the votes.
Right, if you can just send out an email.
Yes.
Yeah, there will be continuous communication on this point.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, you know how I am.
I'm sorry.
Sir.
Sign in.
Oh, the sign-in sheet? The sign-in sheet, yeah, if anybody...
Is everybody signed in?
The sign-in sheet, yeah. If you missed that, come on over, it's over here.
And the important thing about the ballots, when you get them, fill them out, because they have to be received by the time they're counted.
Yeah, do not wait
Don't
around.
wait till the 24th, and they don't, and the board sometimes gives people static about hand-delivered ballots. Just put them in the mail, because that's what the board likes.
Thank you. Put them in the mail.
Sign-in sheet is here, sign-in sheet is back here for anybody who can sign.
Well, we're trying to work on that for Pennsylvania elections. We are.
Voting for inclusion in the USW contract will occur in about a month. Please leave a message on this page about what you have seen. Thank you.